trying to think how to put this, right? I think James O'Keefe is comfortable with his identity as a conservative. And with Tim and Tulsi, it's more complicated. So I guess it would probably make the most sense to me to start the relative left end, I guess, of the spectrum with Tulsi, since after all, she was a Bernie-crat in 2016.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, she endorsed Bernie, which from the Brett Weinstein school of qualifying as a leftist is really, there's your diploma. So yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I will say I remember when that people would constantly bring that up about Brett in 2018, and I always said, okay, but as he endorsed Bernie in 2020, I'd like to, see if that happens, right?
Same with Tulsi, actually. Come to think of it. Also, did not endorse Bernie.
Exactly. Oh, well, not only did she not endorse Bernie, she ran against him and endorsed Biden before Bernie had dropped out of the race.
That's right.
So, but I suppose you could say to give her due, I think even on foreign policy, it's more of a mixed bag than many people realize. There are definitely some skeletons rattling around in that closet, but I think that many of her foreign policy positions are decent, certainly much better than most conservatives would have. And
yeah, I would say even relative, just to cut in there, like even relative to like the good, like say the Republicans that would vote against the Ukraine funding, for instance, she's probably even better than those guys generally. I would say, even though like she's about as maybe as trustworthy.
Yeah, no, exactly. I did. So what Matt is referring to there, we might actually still have this graphic from last week. I don't know, but I did so this is something that's come up a good bit while we were on break for this show, that there was a lot of discussion, including, I'll say, another former guest of the show who I have a lot of disagreements with about things like this, about how to kind of read those guys, right? The Republicans who voted against the Ukraine funding. And so I wrote this article for Current Affairs. It was called something like congressional progressives need to do better on foreign policy. But that doesn't mean Republicans are doves. Where I have the hot take that there are legitimate criticisms of like AOC, but like Josh Hawley's worse, right? And not just in general, obviously, but like worse on foreign policy. That like he's a huge anti-China hawk, and et cetera, right? There are lots.
The position on Israel-Palestine for a lot of those folks is pretty revealing, I think.
Right, exactly. And then you can say even on domestic policy, she's got like a standard Democrat kind of position on healthcare. At least she did in 2020. She started out supporting Medicare for all. Then she kind of did the same thing that most of the Democratic candidates did, where they, basically said, well, okay, maybe not quite, but like public option. And they had like different rhetorical strategies for how to frame it. And hers was just to continue to say Medicare for all. But then like, if you actually looked at it, it was like what she meant was just public option.
Yeah. I mean, she followed Elizabeth Warren. She was really like a Wario version of Elizabeth Warren. Right? Like she did the exact same, she felt the same hurdle, which is like that thing where the press is like, but you're going to take away people's, what about these union folks' healthcare? You're going to take away that? And Bernie's just like, yeah, a single payer system's the best system. And Tulsi's like, actually, no, that's a little bit anti-American. We don't want to be doing that. And it's like, this is just what Warren is doing. And yet all of like the Tulsi fan, anyway, I don't want to get started on that too much.
No, I mean, no, exactly though, right? I mean, it's the same, but I mean, it's the same policy. Like, yeah, I mean, it's like Warren, in fact, wasn't even quite as bad, although Warren was, I think ended up.
They both shivved Bernie just from different sorts of, trajectories.
Yeah, totally, right? I mean, I think Warren was like sort of tried to outsmart herself and ended up saying some pretty goofy things that didn't really make sense, that we're going to do these like this 2-stage thing where we're going to have like 2 massive overhauls of the American healthcare system back to back, and totally believe the second one's coming, and then but like Tulsi is just, she wasn't even doing that, right? I mean, she wasn't even saying, oh, someday we'll have Medicare for all, right? She was saying she was saying exactly. I mean, it was the Mayor Pete thing, right? Medicare for
Yep.
all who want it, which is just
Yep.
a, of course, as we all know, is just a way of saying we're going to have a 2-tier healthcare system for, for rich people and the rest of us. But okay, so she has some vaguely leftish positions on different issues. On the other hand, Chick, do we have the Fox News clip of Tulsi? This is the one from the 5. I think it's the last one I gave you.
Voters in San Francisco last night sent a big message on public safety, recalling Progressive District Attorney Chesa Boudin after major public outcry that his approach on crime was too lenient on criminals. Now, Boudin is blaming the right for his loss.
People are angry. They're frustrated. And I want to be very clear about what happened tonight. The right-wing billionaires outspent us 3-1. They exploited an environment in which people are appropriately upset. And they created an electoral dynamic where we were literally shadow boxing.
Sounds like a bunch of excuses to me. The results, the people's voices were heard, and it sent a very clear message that even the most left-leaning cities are fed up with surging crime rates.
She's giving off a real, like, are we the baddies vibe, like it's just aesthetically, it's very, seems very evil.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's like the real bottom drawer of just like fascist propaganda, where it's like the repeat image of a mother getting hit by a car with her infant. Like, then this guy doesn't, he likes this, I think, actually. He likes mothers. I mean, you could just tell, like, he said billionaires, but look at this mother getting hit by a car. It's like, oh my God. And, it's not like, I mean, people also should know a little bit about the genesis of Tulsi. Like, I'm old enough to remember. I remember doing talking with Michael about her. She was trolling Obama for not saying radical Islamic terror before.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. She's like that was how she was made. That's where she met the booker at Fox News, right? It was like, I'll come on there as a Democrat and say that Obama is a little bit soft on Muslims, and there's a Bernie endorsement. It's like, well, she said the Muslim thing. She does go to APAC quite a lot as well, those conferences. But you know what? She did back our boy. And, we'd take anybody at that point. A big tent, I guess.
No, exactly. I mean, and look, I mean, I have, I was, we were talking about Bill Barr earlier, the article I wrote about Bill Barr, Daily Beast. I mean, one of the things I said in there is like 99% of the article was shitting on him. But I mean, like I said, look, I mean, he did have that like brief swing to the left where he was supporting Bernie for a minute. If he came back, great, right?
Absolutely
wonderful.
Hey, doors. It's a revolving door, and like I definitely remember. There's at least a couple times on TMBS that we would take a toast, like, got to hand it to Tulsi here, coming through with the nice talking point at a moment that's actually useful.
Yeah, totally, right. So it's like, look, I mean, I am all in favor of, when people come around to your political positions, you should welcome them with open arms. But, and so, yeah, in 2016, sure, I think it was absolutely the right thing to do to happily accept her support. But then if she's going to run for president herself, the fact that she had this history of saying that, well, sure, Obama might be, drone bombing American danger and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he's not willing to say the magical words radical Islamic terrorism. And if you don't say those words in that order, you're not really serious about this, right? Like, that's relevant, right? Because you have to look at somebody's overall record to try to get a sense of how they're going to act in the future, which, seems totally reasonable to me.
I mean, politicians do those things to, reach out to certain coalitions, right? Like, it's just a bit basic.
Yeah, no, exactly, right? So, and this Chesa Boudin thing is like really bad. Like, I mean, this is I don't think we should skim over this lightly, right? I mean, this is, like we're talking about, a prosecutor who came in and they I think Fred Jason put it really well. This is revolution, right? I mean, it did exactly what he said he would do, right? Like this is, and then, I think, probably ran up against some of the limits of that, that like one. I think that at times when people are particularly concerned about crime, not that it actually went up under Boudin, but whatever, right? Then, that it's very easy for, to like paint that in a certain light. And I also think that there's like a built-in structural problem that like, okay, the people that you're really helping by having a more humane approach to the prosecutor's office don't really throw around a lot of money or exercise a lot of political influence or frankly, even vote that much. Right. So, for all sorts of reasons, it makes sense as an outcome. But I mean, this just seems really low to me to be like, oh, see, the people were saying that, that we won't stand for this, like somewhat more humane approach, to prosecution.
No, and I think a centrist take would just be like, yeah, billionaires did spend a lot of money, but like crime is an issue. But she just went full on, yeah.
Oh, talking about the billionaires is just an excuse.
Exactly. Like that's objectively true. That right, like what he's saying, and she's just like doing that, like stare old people in the face, and shout at them mentality.
Yeah. Well, there's this posture that they're against the sort of like tech elites, but this was all driven by tech elites. Jason Calacanis, he's like he invested in Uber, and he did a few other nice investments, got some money to play with. Started a GoFundMe the day Chase like won office, say we need to like keep this guy accountable, and hired some hack to like keep him accountable. And we see what that is, which is that like it's to extrapolate rising crime that is frankly happening everywhere because there's a pandemic and a giant inflation and people lost jobs and had their lives upended, and there's mass death. The people, that's like one progressive prosecutor. Actually, it's two. It's Krasner as well. Like somehow those two guys have caused crime to
San Francisco and Philadelphia. Between them, they caused a national crime wave. Yeah, exactly. Everywhere in between. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like, look, I'm even with somebody who's willing to say, I think that sometimes on the left, our instinct is to like downplay worries about crime in ways that aren't helpful. I think it's like a real concern for a lot of working class people. And that's like, I think Eric Levitz wrote something good about this. We actually had him on to talk about a while back. I would argue that you can acknowledge it's a real problem without adopting your enemy's solutions to that problem. Again, Norway, much more lenient criminal justice system, much lower crime rates. So, I do think there are economic solutions to this problem. But like, you can even say, let's say for the sake of argument, the billionaires, didn't play that big a role. I think they probably did, but let's say they didn't. That all that was driving this was just like, mass fears about crime. Well, okay, what are you going to say about that? If you're going to like go on a national, cable news show, like, and you're going to comment on that, what are you going to say about it? Like, here's one thing that she could say, right? Tulsi the progressive, right? She could say, well, this is a tragedy because then maybe it really shows that if we just have these more reasonable, criminal justice policies, or maybe she even has specific criticisms of Boudin, like we could get into them, right? But like, that like having more lenient criminal justice policies without doing anything about the underlying root causes makes you vulnerable to backlash. And so, of course, since a local prosecutor, it's not like they can do anything about expanding the American welfare state. So this is like maybe an understandable tragedy about what happened, but instead she's not doing any of that, right? She's just like feeding into the Fox News scare grandma narrative about like liberal prosecutors and crime.
Yeah, I mean, well, what's interesting about this now is because there's something to contradict what they're saying, which is like Eric Adams has been in office now. New Yorkers do not support the way he's responded to this. He's cracked out massively, and guess what? Do not feel safer on the subways since Eric Adams. I've seen cops. I've seen cops patrol trains one time since actually a couple times, but one time sticks out since this new presence on the train on the rail. Since they like let the guy who shot people just waltz out until he turned himself in. But it was like late at night, and some delivery guy had his bike on. It was one of those electronic bikes, and maybe you're not supposed to have those on the train, but he was clearly taking it home at the end of a night, right? And some cops get on, and like I'm just like listening to my headphones. I don't expect anything because there's no problems on the train. There's like eight people on the train entirely, and all of a sudden, like I hear shouting, and it's the cops harassing this guy until he gets off the train. So like that's what like keeping us safe is now, is to harass delivery guys at the end of the night. And again, it's like all these things that need to be addressed through like, I mean, things in the fucking Joker movie, right? Like we need to offer mental health services. And
yes,
right? Like this isn't a mystery what the problem is here. It's not a bunch of cops going through with their hands in their belts, like looking people up and down, making sure they're orderly or some shit. Like, and I also think people are right to say that the perception of things being more dangerous, even though like certain metrics in certain cities might have gone up, I do think it's the visibility of the homeless people. And there's that again, like that's not a solution that like you do, that they don't need handcuffs, right? They need to be housed.
No, exactly. I mean, I think that I mean, I think the way it's played out is awful, and you know, I actually think you know, our friend Atticus Berry got a lot of flack for pointing out some like correct aspects of this, you know, at the time that a lot of this argument was going on, you know. But I mean, I think that you know, I think the problem is that like there is this sort of like awful neoliberal centrism where like this, where it's like, okay, we're not going to like provide people with housing and mental health counseling and addiction services and all the things that people actually need who are like suffering all this human misery. But we also won't arrest them. We'll just, you know, like let them sleep in the park forever, right? You know, that's like, that's not a very good solution. And it's one that like tends to, in fact, the longer you do that, the more support builds up for like the right-wing carceral solution. But like also that, you know, just arresting people for the crime of like not having a place to sleep is like,
the horrible thing is it's like it's stuck in this debate between like two sides that are arguing like what we do with just absolute not enough resources. Like, do we just start arresting people and forcing them to go into places? Do we try to make like encampments safer somehow? And it's like, as long as real estate and an entire, and honestly, not just a real estate industry, the entire like value to human beings of middle class people in general is tied up in their housing, right? And like that contradiction of like making sure that investment stays nice and dear, so people can like retire off of it, and also we need to get people into houses. Like it's a contradiction that's like, it's just like there's no solution to it except just to like massively build houses and put people in them.
Well, it kind of reminds me of how like whatever president is in office gets credit for whatever economy like he happens to, you know, preside over, where I feel like solving these criminal issues, I mean, you know, there's, you know, shocks like the pandemic that can cause crime to rise, but the point is that it would take like a very lengthy approach, right, to actually solve crime at the root, because you're talking about change over generations. But then, you know, who happens to be in office, like whether it's Eric Adams or a reformer is the one that gets, you know, like gets blamed or gets the credit. So it's hard to have like an intelligible conversation with it, because you're right. You know, if there's a lot of crime happening in your neighborhood, you want changes now, right? So I get that, but it's
no, that's true.
Like the wrong people are getting the credit.
I would point. No, I think that's for sure. I would also point out again. I mean, I think I mean, you're right, of course. I mean, that there are some things that are like going to be very slow intergenerational changes, even in the best scenario. I mean, I think that's true. But I also think it's true there's a lot you could do that would like have a big impact on the crime rate, like immediately, right? Like jobs programs, right? I mean, is an obvious example of something that's like going to have an immediate impact on the crime rate. Or like if you don't, if like, you know, the kind of thing that you're concerned about is like a homeless guy shooting up in the park, then like provided housing and also substance abuse counseling, right? That should be part of that, right? I mean, like those are things that actually will, you know,
well, I mean,
start to get some traction pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned like Anna and Jason also makes this point, like things like safe injection sites that get popular, like those are good, but they are not panaceas. Like it won't just. You need like you need a lot more. I think like I also think like campaigning for those things is absolutely right on.
Sure.
But like there's a. I mean, there's a. And remember
there's also just something horrible and depressing about the idea that that's like, the limits of anybody's imagination, right? I mean, that it's like, oh well, I don't know, you're going to be, I guess we'll just try to make this like just horrified symptom of social breakdown. We'll try to make it like a little clearer. So
yeah. I guess I was thinking the change in the crime rate is slow because we never actually do anything other than like actually like input these things in America. So at least I'm thinking about New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some changes that would be. I think there are certain aspects of crime problems that would be very slow to change, but I also think there are things that would like. I think there are things that would make a difference right away. Would be my take. Okay, we've got. So I want to speed through Tulsi so we could get to Tim. So let's. Let's see. First, we have, I believe, a clip from Tulsi Gabbard's speech at the Conservative Political Action Committee. Do we have that, Jake?
No, I think I'm missing.
I have here. I might be able to find it in the. I might be able to find it in the video clips. Let me see. So it is. Yeah, here we go. Here is Tulsi speaking at CPAC.
My fellow Americans, as a young boy, I dreamed of being a baseball. But tonight I say we must move forward, not backward, upward, not forward, and always twirling towards freedom.
Okay.
I promise that was a bit me saying that I didn't know what you were talking about. Not that I completely forgot about the joke that we 100% discussed. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. No, that is just what Tulsi's speech at CPAC reminded me of. I watched the entirety of it while I was working out earlier today, and like 90% of it was stuff that might as well be twirling towards freedom. The only the close, the policy stuff is there's like a little bit of stuff about cancel culture and online censorship at the end, and a little bit of culture war stuff. She kind of refers to the parents in Loudoun County, so that's like a reference to like CRT things. And I guess I just want to make 2 points about this and then throw to you, right? One is that I think that what's not there is maybe as important as what is there, because like, okay, not the CRT stuff, but like some of the rest of that, fine. Right? Freedom is good. Yay. The toxicity is bad, whatever, all fine. But if you're going to make a big thing about free speech, and frankly, especially if you're talking to Republicans, it might be nice to challenge them a little bit with by talking about, well, stuff like, without getting into the soap opera of Loudoun County and like, and whatever, defending everything that happened there, but like stuff like the CRT bans in general, which are obviously a huge attempt at, at shutting down discussion of ideas that they find dangerous. Stuff like the Republican state legislatures that have passed laws to go after the boycotts, divestment, and sanctions movement, the Palestine solidarity movement, to boycott Israel. Stuff like, stuff like the laws that say like, you could run over a protester with your car, right? That all seems, those all seem like important free speech issues that she's not talking about, which I think is telling, right? Because she's, it seems like whatever her official politics is on a day-to-day basis, right? She's slotted into something of a role here. And then the other point is that, without like, I don't know, I listened to like a podcast episode or two about the Loudoun County stuff. I don't know. I couldn't reconstruct in very great detail, what happened there, but like abstracted from that a little bit. like the fact that, she's sort of doing this culture war signaling about on the theme of libs are crazy and, social justice stuff is crazy. And she seems to do a lot of that these days, right? So I think we had Andy grab the graphic of her tweets from today. I think today or yesterday, because they just announced this. So she says this good step forward. FINA, swimming's world governing body, just voted to ban most trans quote women unquote from competition. Just so dickish. All right, but unfortunately, men who transitioned before age, I don't know why before age 12 is in quotation marks, right? That
just seems... yeah, you're spamming the scare quote a little bit.
Will be allowed to compete. This may encourage boys to quote transition unquote before they are old enough to make such dangerous life-altering decision. FINA should allow the fair and safest policy. All caps, no biological men should be allowed to compete against biological women, period. Mm-hmm. And this just kind of seems like, okay, before talking about the politics of it, I think just in the sort of more principled question, whatever you think about the like finer details of exactly how, this decision, or if there's a more trans inclusive policy that'd be better, and what do you think the hormone requirements should be and all that stuff, none of which I can claim any sort of expertise about, and I'm not going to try to weigh in on any of that stuff, right? But whatever you think about the issue, just the fact that like she even got what she wanted out of this, but like she's still like, no, not good enough, right? Like we need this to be absolute. There cannot be anyone, right, who has the wrong chromosomes who's ever doing this. I don't care if they have no physical disadvantages. I will come no physical advantages because they, didn't go through puberty as a boy. That there's like no kind of competitive issue at all. I'll still come up with a reason it's bad. So the first thing is just a principle. This just seems really cruel to me, right? So that's the first half, right? But then like the political half is, even if her positions on stuff like Medicare for all and all that were like better than they are, right? We went over that earlier. They're not actually that great, but like even if they're better than they are, I think that I sort of think you can't do both. In other words, like because like what's the function of stuff like this for conservatives, right? Like why are they pushing this, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm a cynical person. I don't really believe that every conservative in the country has developed an authentic burning passion for athletic integrity in girls' sports, right? I don't think that
maybe Joe Rogan. I think he actually cares, but
I think Rogan might actually care. Yeah, I think that's actually something you might get excited about. But I think like your average conservative politico, I do not think they care, right? Like I don't think before this issue came up they ever spent like a second thinking about women's sports, maybe at all ever, right? So why do they push this stuff? Why do they push any of this stuff, right? Because it's like, well, look, they can't, if you're whatever, pick your favorite conservative, right? If you're, Charlie Kirk or, you're, whatever, right? Just pick one. Like, you can't exactly, and you want to say you like represent ordinary people against elites and all this stuff. You can't talk about healthcare, right? You can't talk about wages, can't talk about any of that stuff, right? Because then it gets very obvious very quickly, right, that you are in fact a servant of elites. So you have to change the subject to all of this, right? You have to change the subject to like, competitive rules and girls swimming and stuff like that. And it just I guess it just seems to me that if you're like aiding and abetting that shell game, right, where like instead of talking about the stuff that conservatives don't want to talk about, we're going to get everybody riled up about stuff like this, then it sort of doesn't matter what your official position is on anything else.
Yeah. I think there's a big part of that that's true. The GOP basically put the bigots on the bench once the Defensive Marriage Act failed, and they realized like, oh crap, we're going to lose this fight. And this is just the new way for them to like sort of like put them back in the game a little bit. Okay, all right, you can't just go after like the gay guy at work anymore. You have to go after drag queens and trans people, right? And then we can play you, right? Like that's the role we have for you in the game now. I also there's a point though that I'm taking from a trans author, Sean Fay, I believe is the name, and she writes that when you think about the government should, whether it's abortion, whether it's transitioning in terms of gender, the government should empower you to have bodily autonomy in these respects. And it's the same way that the government should empower you to just frankly have healthcare in general. Right. And and the through line in all these arguments is that you can't trust people. You can't even really trust doctors. We need to get legislation involved here and control the plebs and their crazy requests from this doctor system, whether it's they want to transition or they want, to get screened for cancer.
Yeah, no, I completely agree about the bodily autonomy, issue, right? I mean, I think that I think that I think that like some of the edge cases about swimming and stuff like that, whatever you say about that, there's, that's a whole rabbit hole of itself. But I mean, I think this sort of general issue about should you be able to, should you be able to do what you want with your body? I mean, if you, of course you should. Right? I mean, and I think there's also a very basic civil rights issue about, I mean, when it comes to, discrimination in general, which, it's also, when somebody like Tulsi, I don't know, I'd like to see her, I don't know, maybe I get a chance, although I think given the topic, it probably won't come up, but I'd like to see her quizzed about, it's like, okay, I mean, you're putting like, women in scare quotes and all this stuff, right? I mean, like, do you actually think like anti-discrimination laws should generally include, should generally include gender identity? I mean, this is because that seems I mean there is a much more basic issue there, but I also think like so that's like the principled issue. I mean, I think the political issue is just okay. If it wasn't this, it would be something else, right? I mean, like if there was if there were no whatever, Leah Thomas didn't exist, whatever. Like if there were no trans people in sports stories to get people riled up about, they would find something cultural to get people excited about because they need to find something like that always.
Mm-hmm.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.